They arrived on my doorstep, suitcases in hand, claiming they needed a place to stay. My son looked defeated, but his wife, Serafina, was practically glowing. They'd sold the house I helped them buy and blew every dime on luxury. Then she called me Bessie and smirked. I just smiled back. You won't believe what happened next. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The morning sun cast a gentle golden glow across Eleanor's backyard, illuminating the dew-kissed petals of her prize-winning hybrid tea roses. At 64, Eleanor found her greatest solace in this garden, a vibrant tapestry of color and scent that absorbed the quiet anxieties of aging. She was carefully deadheading a particularly stubborn bloom. The gentle snap of the stem, a familiar, comforting sound, when the crunch of tires on her gravel driveway shattered the peaceful symphony of chirping birds. Eleanor straightened up, a mild frown creasing her brow. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her gaze drifted towards the driveway, where a gleaming, dark-colored SUV, certainly not a local vehicle, had pulled up. The passenger door swung open and out stepped Serafina, her daughter-in-law, looking as if she'd just walked off a fashion magazine cover. A shock of perfectly styled blonde hair, a tailored cream linen suit, and large designer sunglasses that hid her eyes. In her manicured hands, she held an oversized, structured handbag and a surprisingly bulky carry-on suitcase. Behind her, her son, Ethan, was wrestling even larger cases from the back of the SUV, his face flushed and strained. This was no casual visit. A knot began to tighten in Eleanor's stomach. Ethan, usually so meticulously neat, looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled and dark shadows smudged beneath his eyes. He caught her eye for a fleeting moment, a silent plea for understanding perhaps, before quickly averting his gaze. Serafina, on the other hand, was a picture of serene composure, almost too perfect, her expression unreadable behind those dark lenses. Yet Eleanor sensed a calculated air about her, a predatory stillness that sent a shiver down her spine. "Eleanor," Serafina called out, her voice bright and a little too loud, like a bell that had lost its resonance. "What a beautiful day for gardening." Eleanor offered a polite, if strained, smile. Serafina, Ethan, what a surprise. Inside the cool, inviting shelter of Eleanor's modest home, the atmosphere grew palpably tense. Her living room, filled with well-loved antique furniture, family photos, and an abundance of thriving houseplants, usually exuded warmth. But Serafina's presence seemed to leach the comfort from the air. Her eyes, now uncovered, scanned every corner, every piece of furniture, not with appreciation, but with a cool, almost critical assessment, as if silently assigning a value to each item, weighing its worth. Eleanor felt her home, her sanctuary, being subtly judged. Ethan, who had finally managed to haul all their luggage inside, placed the last suitcase down with a thump that echoed in the sudden quiet. He ran a hand through his already messy hair, avoiding his mother's questioning gaze. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." Eleanor's heart sank, confirming her earlier intuition. She led them to the small dining table, offering tea which Serafina politely declined, stating she preferred something stronger, but didn't press the issue. It was then that Ethan dropped the bombshell. We sold the house, Mom." Eleanor's world tilted. "Sold the house? Oh?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Not their house, she thought. Not the beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch and the sprawling garden she'd always admired. The house she had helped them buy, sacrificing $40,000 of her carefully accumulated retirement savings. Money she'd intended for her own golden years, but had given freely, joyfully, to help her son and his wife establish their future. She remembered the pride she'd felt watching them move in, seeing their dreams take root. Now that dream was apparently gone. "Why?" Eleanor finally managed to ask, her voice laced with a confusion that bordered on disbelief. Serafina shrugged, a delicate, almost dismissive gesture. "We didn't need permission, Bessie. It's our house after all." The casual use of Bessie, a nickname Eleanor detested and only her late husband had ever been allowed to use, cut deeper than the words themselves. It was a calculated jab, a deliberate undermining of her maternal authority and her significant contribution. Before Eleanor could process the insult, Serafina's face brightened, a gleeful, almost triumphant smile spreading across her lips. And you wouldn't believe the offer we got. $620,000. It was too good to pass up. She practically preened, clearly expecting Eleanor to share in her unbridled enthusiasm. Eleanor stared, her mind reeling. $620,000. That was an enormous sum. The logical next question formed on her lips. But where are you going? Where's your new place? A deafening silence descended upon the small room. Ethan, who had been nervously picking at a loose thread on his trousers, froze. Serafina's triumphant smile wavered, replaced by a subtle tightening of her jaw. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the distant chirping of Eleanor's garden birds. The alarm bells in Eleanor's mind, which had been gently chiming, now began to clang with insistent urgency. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on the tablecloth. We were hoping we could stay here with you, Mom, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Just temporarily, of course. Eleanor blinked, processing his words. They had sold a house for over $500,000, and now they were homeless, asking to move into her two-bedroom cottage. The sheer audacity of it left her momentarily speechless. But the money, she asked, her voice tight with the disbelief. What happened to all that money? Serafina waved a dismissive hand. Oh, expenses. Her tone was vague, almost flippant, as if discussing pocket change. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Expenses? Serafina, that's over $600,000. What kind of expenses? There was a firm, unwavering edge to Eleanor's voice now, a tone that brooked no further evasion. Serafina sighed dramatically, as if Eleanor was being utterly unreasonable. She began to tick off items on her fingers, her voice gaining an almost boastful quality. Well, there was the diamond necklace I've always wanted, and Ethan insisted I get those new designer clothes. Then the car detailing for the SUV, it was absolutely necessary. Oh, and the spa trip to California was divine, utterly revitalizing. And of course, we had to pay off all those lingering credit card balances. She finished with a flourish, as if she had just listed prudent financial decisions. Eleanor's internal alarm bells weren't just ringing anymore. They were a deafening siren. She watched Serafina, her face flushed with a mixture of self-satisfaction and burgeoning defensiveness. It was our money, Bessie, Serafina declared, noticing the stony expression on Eleanor's face. We earned it. We had every right to spend it as we pleased. Ethan, meanwhile, sat slumped in his chair, a portrait of utter defeat. His shoulders were bowed, his hands clasped tightly between his knees, a silent testament to his helplessness. He didn't meet his mother's gaze, nor did he offer any argument to his wife's startling revelations. Serafina, oblivious to the storm brewing in Eleanor's heart, looked completely unconcerned by their sudden homelessness, her expensive purchases clearly far outweighing any practical considerations. Eleanor drew a deep breath, the scent of fresh-cut roses from her garden suddenly mingling with the bitter tang of deceit. Her voice, though low, carried an undeniable steel. Serafina, she began, leaning forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Let's try this again. Where did all the money go? Serafina rolled her eyes, a gesture of impatience that grated on Eleanor's nerves. It's really not your business, Eleanor. We're grown adults. Her tone was dismissive, as if Eleanor was a nosy child. It became my business, Eleanor retorted, her voice firm, the moment you showed up at my door, suitcases in hand, asking for a place to live. That house, Serafina, was built on hard work, and if I recall correctly, a substantial portion of my retirement savings. When you convert that into $620,000 and then appear here without a roof over your heads, it absolutely becomes my business. Ethan, who had remained silent, his face buried in his hands, let out a shaky sigh. He finally lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a raw despair that pierced Eleanor's heart. Mom, he choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. Serafina. She had about $80,000 in credit card debt. Eleanor stared dumbfounded. $80,000? For what? She asked, the words clipped. Ethan flinched, glancing nervously at Serafina, who to Eleanor's surprise had adopted an almost defiant posture. Clothes, shoes, handbags, Ethan mumbled, each word a fresh wound. And some pre-marriage vacations. She racked it up before we even met, but then it just kept growing. Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing the endless procession of designer shopping bags Serafina often displayed, the casual mentions of luxurious getaways before she married Ethan. She had dismissed them then as youthful exuberance, a phase. Now they were a gaping financial chasm. $80,000, Eleanor repeated, trying to steady her voice. And the rest? Ethan hesitated, running a hand over his face. Serafina, she invested $300,000. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. 300,000? Invested in what? My friend Tiffany's boutique, Serafina interjected, her voice regaining some of its earlier confidence. It's a high-end fashion and accessories boutique, very exclusive. She made it sound like a perfectly sound, indeed brilliant, business venture. Eleanor felt a cold dread creep through her. $300,000 casually handed over to a friend for a boutique. She quickly did the math in her head. 80,000 in credit card debt, 300,000 in a dubious investment. The jewelry, the designer clothes, the car detailing, the spa trip. Even allowing for the initial 40,000 she'd contributed, that was over $500,000. Gone. Vaporized. She leaned back in her chair, the gravity of their situation settling heavily upon her. So let me get this straight, Eleanor said, her voice slow and deliberate. You sold your house for $620,000. 80,000 went to clear credit card debt, another 300,000 to a friend's boutique. The rest was spent on personal luxuries. You have literally squandered over $600,000. Is that correct? Neither of them offered a denial. Ethan simply nodded, his face a mask of misery. Serafina, however, bristled slightly. It wasn't squandered, Eleanor. It was allocated. Allocated, Eleanor echoed, a bitter taste in her mouth. And now you have nothing left. No house, no savings, no discernible income from this boutique to cover your living expenses. What exactly is your plan for getting back on your feet? Serafina shrugged, a gesture of almost unbelievable indifference. Ethan will get another job, obviously, and Tiffany's boutique will start turning a profit any day now. It's just getting established. She spoke as if these were minor inconveniences easily overcome, her casual confidence utterly chilling in its blatant disregard for the disaster they had created. Eleanor stared at her daughter-in-law, appalled. The casualness, the lack of remorse, the sheer irresponsibility of it all. Serafina truly seemed to believe that everything would just magically sort itself out. It was at that moment, seeing the entitlement radiating from Serafina and the utter helplessness etched on Ethan's face, that Eleanor made her decision. A quiet, resolute conviction settled in her heart. No, Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm, cutting through the tense air like a sharp knife. You can't stay here. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. Mom, you can't be serious. We're family. His voice was laced with desperation, a plea that tore at Eleanor's resolve, but she held firm. I am serious, Ethan, Eleanor replied calmly, meeting his distraught gaze. I love you, but I will not enable this. You have created a disaster of your own making, and I will not allow my home to become a refuge where you can avoid the consequences of your choices. Serafina, who had been absently scrolling through her phone, slammed it down onto the table with a sharp crack that made them both jump. Her eyes, usually cool and calculating, now blazed with fury. How dare you, Eleanor? You're judging my business decisions. You're judging my life. I am judging your reckless spending, Serafina, Eleanor shot back, her voice rising slightly. And let's be clear, it was not your money you were so casually throwing away. It was equity in a home that Ethan worked for, that I helped you both buy. Money that represented stability, security, a future. And you squandered it on frivolous luxuries and a speculative venture without a second thought for the consequences. Serafina sprang to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. Her face was contorted with rage, all pretense of composure gone. You wouldn't understand, you old woman, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. You live in this tiny, ancient house. You wouldn't understand standards, what it takes to maintain a certain lifestyle. Eleanor met Serafina's furious gaze, her own composure a brittle shield against the escalating aggression. I understand perfectly well, Serafina, Eleanor replied, her voice cool and steady. The importance of living within one's means. It's a concept you seem to have spectacularly failed to grasp. Serafina's perfectly constructed facade finally shattered. Her eyes, usually so calculating, now gleamed with naked entitlement and a cruel malice Eleanor had only glimpsed before. You're just jealous, Serafina spat, her lip curling in a sneer. Jealous of my beauty, my style, my husband. You never had any of this. You're just a bitter, old woman stuck in her dusty little house. The accusation stung, but Eleanor refused to let it penetrate. Instead, she turned her attention to the silent, slumped figure of her son. Ethan, Eleanor said, her voice softer now, laced with a maternal concern that belied the anger she felt toward his wife. Whose idea was it to sell the house? And this investment in Tiffany's boutique? Was that your decision too? Ethan flinched at the directness of the question. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting his mother's, and the shame and regret etched on his face were a heavy burden. Mom, he stammered, his voice weak. We talked about it. Serafina thought it was a good idea to free up capital, to invest in something more dynamic than real estate. His words were evasive, his gaze darting nervously towards Serafina, who was now tapping her foot impatiently. But was it your idea, Ethan? Eleanor pressed, her gaze unwavering. Or did Serafina convince you? Ethan squirmed, clearly uncomfortable. She had a lot of strong arguments. She's very persuasive. His hesitant answers, his inability to directly claim ownership of the decisions, spoke volumes about Serafina's manipulative control over their shared finances. Serafina let out a short, derisive laugh, a harsh, grating sound. Persuasive? Honey, you begged me to marry you. You told me I was the best thing that ever happened to you, that you'd hit the lottery with me. Of course you listened to me. I know what's best. She spoke as if Ethan were a child, a prized possession, not an equal partner in a marriage. Eleanor watched Ethan's shoulders slump further, his eyes fixed on the floor once more. His silence was a resounding confirmation of her suspicions. Her son, once so vibrant and independent, was now a shadow of his former self, utterly emasculated by this woman. Serafina, emboldened by Ethan's silence and Eleanor's controlled anger, escalated her verbal assault. You're just a pathetic, lonely mother, Eleanor, trying to control your son's life because you have nothing else. You have no idea what it's like to have ambition, to live a real life. That was it, the culmination of the insults, the blatant disrespect, the appalling waste of their shared future, and the cruel attack on her character finally broke Eleanor's composure. The quiet fury that had simmered beneath the surface erupted. That's enough! Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip, loud and sharp, echoing through the small house. Get out! Get out of my house, both of you! Now! Serafina barked a laugh, a truly ugly sound. And go where, old woman? We have nowhere to go, thanks to your cold-hearted refusal to help your own son. That, Eleanor stated, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage, is not my problem. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Get out. Serafina's laughter died on her lips, her face contorted into a mask of pure fury. Without another word, she whirled around, snatched her oversized handbag from the table, and stormed towards the front door. She yanked it open with such force that it crashed against the wall, the sound reverberating through the quiet neighborhood. Help! Someone please help me! Serafina screamed, her voice shrill and deliberately theatrical, clearly intended for anyone within earshot. My own son's mother is throwing us out. She's making us homeless. She hates us. Eleanor watched horrified as Serafina expertly transformed herself into a victim. Her shoulders shook and she covered her face with her hands, letting out loud theatrical sobs. A few curious neighbors, alerted by the commotion, began to emerge from their homes, their faces etched with concern and confusion. Mrs. Henderson from next door, usually meticulous about her rose bushes, dropped her pruning shears, her mouth agape. Eleanor stepped onto the porch, her heart pounding. Serafina, that's enough, she commanded, her voice strained. But Serafina merely whirled around, her face streaked with feigned tears, her eyes now gleaming with a cold, triumphant malice directed solely at Eleanor. "You're selfish, Eleanor. You're a bitter, selfish old woman who doesn't care about her own family." Before Eleanor could respond, Serafina lunged forward. In a shocking, swift movement, she raised her hand and with a sickening crack, slapped Eleanor hard across the face. The blow echoed in the sudden, stunned silence that had fallen over the small gathering of neighbors. Eleanor reeled back, the force of the slap jarring her head and sending a searing pain across her cheek. Her vision blurred for a moment, and the taste of blood filled her mouth as her teeth bit down on her inner cheek. She touched her stinging face, her fingers coming away with a faint smudge of redness. Through her dazed shock, Eleanor's eyes found Ethan. He stood frozen in the doorway, a deer caught in headlights, his face a mixture of confusion, horror, and utter helplessness. He offered no defense, no intervention, no comfort, just a silent, overwhelmed witness to his wife's brutal assault on his mother. The sting on Eleanor's cheek vibrated through her entire body. Her hand, still pressed against the throbbing skin, came away damp. She looked at Serafina, who stood defiantly, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and something akin to twisted satisfaction. "Did you just hit me?" Eleanor asked, her voice quiet, almost hoarse with disbelief, yet imbued with a chilling calm. "You deserved it, old hag," Serafina snarled, her words loud enough for the now silent neighbors to hear. "You deserved every bit of it, interfering in our lives." Humiliation washed over Eleanor, a hot, bitter wave. To be physically assaulted, to be verbally abused, all in front of her neighbors, her sanctity shattered. She turned her gaze to Ethan, her son, whose eyes were wide with shock, but still he remained inert. "Ethan?" she prompted, a desperate plea in her voice. "Are you going to let her do this?" Ethan finally stirred, mumbling, "Mom, she's just upset." His voice was weak, an inadequate excuse that solidified Eleanor's resolve. Her son, her own flesh and blood, was incapable of defending her, of defending himself. Eleanor reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. "You have 5 minutes to get your things and leave my property, Serafina," she announced, her voice gaining strength. "Or I will call the police and have you removed, and I will press charges for assault." She didn't wait for a response. Her fingers were already dialing 911. Serafina's face, for the first time, registered genuine panic. Her eyes darted from Eleanor to the phone, then to the gathering neighbors. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, though her defiance had a shaky quality now. "Police, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's calm voice filled the silence. "Yes," Eleanor said, holding the phone steady, her gaze locked on Serafina. "I need officers at my residence, 1422 Sycamore Lane. My daughter-in-law has assaulted me, and she and my son are refusing to leave my property. They are trespassers." Serafina's jaw dropped. The theatrical tears vanished, replaced by a mask of horrified realization. She tried to interrupt, but Eleanor simply turned her back, continuing to provide details to the dispatcher. Ethan, meanwhile, stood frozen, looking utterly lost. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the afternoon quiet. 2 patrol cars pulled up, and Officers Ramirez and Davies emerged, their uniforms crisp, their faces serious. Officer Ramirez, a tall, no-nonsense woman, approached Eleanor. "Ma'am, we received a call about an assault. Can you tell us what happened?" Eleanor, still feeling the sting on her cheek, calmly recounted the events, pointing to Serafina. "She slapped me across the face, officer, right here in front of everyone." Mrs. Gable, Eleanor's next-door neighbor, stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "It's true, officer," she interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "I saw it. Mrs. Davies was standing right on her porch, and her daughter-in-law just hauled off and slapped her, completely unprovoked." Several other neighbors nodded their agreement, their collective presence a powerful witness. Officer Ramirez turned to Serafina, her expression stern. "Is this true, ma'am?" Serafina opened her mouth, then closed it, her bravado evaporating under the officer's scrutiny. She glanced wildly at Ethan, who still stood silent, offering no defense, no support. Seeing her son's continued inaction, Eleanor's last shred of mercy for Serafina dissolved. "Yes," Eleanor stated decisively, meeting Officer Ramirez's gaze. "I want to press charges." Serafina's face went white. She let out a choked gasp, a sound of genuine fear. Officer Ramirez nodded. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for assault." Serafina began to protest, to argue, but Officer Davies calmly took her arm, reading her rights. She was handcuffed, her designer handbag retrieved, and then led, stunned and subdued, to the back of a patrol car. As the car pulled away, taking Serafina towards the police station, a strange quiet descended. Ethan, looking utterly numb, began to slowly, mechanically, load his and Serafina's suitcases back into the SUV. His movements were robotic, as if he were merely going through the motions. "Where will you go, Ethan?" Eleanor asked, her voice softer now, tinged with a profound sadness. He shrugged, a defeated gesture. "I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know." The casual admission revealed the full extent of his financial destitution, a man stripped bare of his home, his savings, and seemingly his will. Eleanor looked at her son, her heart aching. "Ethan," she began, a sliver of hope in her voice. "If you would just leave her, if you would choose to walk away from this, I would help you. We could rebuild." It was a last-ditch offer, a mother's desperate attempt to reclaim her son. Ethan hesitated, his gaze drifting to the empty spot where the patrol car had been. "She's my wife, Mom," he finally said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He got into the SUV, started the engine, and without another word drove away, leaving Eleanor standing alone on her porch, the silence of the afternoon heavy with the weight of her grief and rage. At the police station, Eleanor gave a detailed statement to Detective Miller, a kind-faced woman with sharp, observant eyes. Eleanor recounted not just the physical assault, but the long history of Serafina's emotional manipulation and financial control over Ethan, painting a picture of a gradual, insidious erosion of her son's independence and finances. Detective Miller listened intently, nodding occasionally. $600,000 gone so quickly, she mused, shaking her head. "And your son didn't object to any of this?" Eleanor sighed. "He's completely manipulated, Detective. Serafina has him utterly under her thumb. He's always been a gentle soul, easily swayed by stronger personalities." That evening, as Eleanor sat in her quiet living room, the memory of the past few hours replayed in her mind. Her cheeks still throbbed, a constant reminder of Serafina's viciousness. Then a thought, a sudden flash of clarity, broke through her exhaustion. The $40,000 she had given Ethan and Serafina for the house. It hadn't been a simple gift. She had structured it, at the insistence of her then-attorney, as a promissory note, a legal loan secured by the property itself. It was a fail-safe, a safeguard, a promise of repayment if the worst should happen. A surge of unexpected hope, cold and calculating, replaced the lingering pain. Eleanor picked up the phone and dialed the number of her longtime attorney, Mr. Arthur Sterling. She needed an urgent meeting. The story takes another turn, one I never could have predicted. You won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure to keep watching. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to hear the rest of my journey. The following morning, Eleanor sat across from Mr. Arthur Sterling in his elegantly furnished office. Mr. Sterling, a man whose silver hair and calm demeanor belied a sharp legal mind, listened intently as Eleanor recounted the painful events of the previous day. He then retrieved the documents related to the $40,000 transfer. "Just as I thought, Eleanor," Mr. Sterling said, tapping a finger on a legal document. This promissory note was properly executed, and more importantly, it was recorded as a lien against the property. Eleanor felt a wave of relief mixed with a cold, hard certainty. "What does that mean, Arthur?" "It means," he explained, adjusting his glasses, "that by selling the house without repaying you the debt secured by that lien, Ethan and Serafina committed a clear breach of contract. Furthermore, their actions constitute conversion, essentially the wrongful appropriation of your property, or in this case, your secured interest in the sale proceeds." He leaned back, his expression serious. "You have solid grounds to sue them, Eleanor. Not just for the $40,000, but also for accrued interest, legal fees, and potentially other damages. We could attach their other assets, if any exist, to satisfy the judgment." Eleanor listened, her mind racing. For years, she had worried about Ethan, always trying to protect him from Serafina's more audacious schemes. But his inaction, his failure to defend her in her own home, had been a turning point. He had chosen Serafina over his own mother, and now he would face the consequences of that choice. "Arthur," she said, her voice firm, "I want you to file a lawsuit against both of them." Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow slightly, a hint of surprise in his gaze, but he merely nodded. "Very well, Eleanor. I'll get the paperwork started immediately." Leaving Mr. Sterling's office, Eleanor felt a newfound strength. Her first priority was to secure her home. She immediately called a locksmith, and by the end of the day, all her locks had been changed. She then arranged for a state-of-the-art security system with cameras to be installed, an undeniable barrier to any future uninvited visits. Later that evening, her phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was strained, agitated. "Mom, Serafina made bail. She's out. She wants to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan," Eleanor replied, her voice devoid of warmth. "And she won't be coming near my house again. I've changed the locks and installed a new security system." A beat of silence. Then, "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm protecting myself, Ethan," Eleanor stated. "And while we're on the subject, Mr. Sterling is filing a lawsuit against both you and Serafina for $60,000. She added the $20,000 in interest and potential damages, wanting to emphasize the seriousness of the situation. $60,000? Ethan gasped, his voice cracking. "Mom, we don't have any money. You know that." "You had $620,000, Ethan," Eleanor reminded him, her voice cold. "Serafina spent it, apparently without a single thought for your future or for mine. Don't tell me you have no money now when you allowed her to squander every dime." "Where are you staying, Ethan?" she asked, a flicker of concern warring with her resolve. He sighed, a sound of utter defeat. "A cheap motel. We barely have enough for another night." Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Ethan, you have a choice to make. You can stand by your wife, the woman who has robbed you of your home and your dignity, and face the consequences of her actions with her. Or you can walk away from her, and perhaps, eventually, we can begin to mend what she has broken between us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Choose, Ethan, your wife or your mother." With that, she hung up, her hands shaking. 3 days later, Mr. Sterling called Eleanor, his voice grave. "Eleanor, I've received some disturbing information from my investigator regarding Serafina." Eleanor's heart thumped against her ribs. "What is it, Arthur?" "It appears Serafina has a significant history of financial deception," Mr. Sterling revealed. "Our investigators found records of 2 prior engagements, both of which ended abruptly. In both instances, the fiancés discovered massive, undisclosed debts Serafina had accumulated, debts she expected them to clear." Eleanor closed her eyes, a sickening feeling twisting in her stomach. It was worse than she thought. "And the boutique?" "The boutique investment," Mr. Sterling continued, a note of grim amusement in his voice, "is a complete fabrication. There's no business license, no storefront, no legitimate business entity whatsoever. The $300,000 simply vanished into thin air, likely into her personal accounts or other, more nefarious ventures." Eleanor felt a cold dread settle over her. She had suspected as much, but to have it confirmed was horrifying. "Is there anything else, Arthur?" she asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Mr. Sterling paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was carefully modulated. "Eleanor, the most devastating revelation is this. Serafina has been having a long-term affair with a very wealthy, very married man named Harrison Stone." Eleanor gasped, a sharp intake of breath. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly began to click into place, forming a picture of cruel betrayal. "And the money?" she whispered. "Our investigator believes a significant portion of the money from the house sale, perhaps even a large part of the boutique investment, was used to fund this affair," Mr. Sterling explained. "Lavish gifts, luxury trips, secret apartments. It seems she was living a double life, all financed by Ethan's money." "But why now?" Eleanor asked, her mind still reeling. "Why the sudden desperation for money and a place to stay?" "Mr. Stone's wife discovered the affair," Mr. Sterling stated, and she wasted no time in ending it, very publicly and very definitively. Serafina was cut off, suddenly left without her sugar daddy and with no home or funds. It's why she was so desperate to move in with you. The phone call with Mr. Sterling left Eleanor with a sickening hollow feeling in her gut. Serafina wasn't just irresponsible. She was a calculating predator, systematically dismantling Ethan's life for her own selfish gain. The thought made Eleanor's blood run cold. She had thought she was protecting her son, but Serafina had already carved him hollow. Arthur, Eleanor said, her voice tight with disgust. Can we use this, all of this, the prior deceptions, the fake boutique, the affair? Absolutely, Eleanor, Mr. Sterling confirmed, his voice resolute. This significantly strengthens our case. We can argue fraud and deception, not just breach of contract in conversion. It will also serve to enlighten Ethan to the true nature of the woman he married. It's crucial he understands. The next day, a process server located Ethan and Serafina at their dingy motel and delivered the lawsuit papers. Eleanor braced herself, knowing a storm was coming. It wasn't long before her phone rang again. It was Ethan, his voice shaking with a raw, guttural rage Eleanor had rarely heard from him. Mom, what is this? $67,000? Are you completely insane? He roared, the extra $7,000 now reflecting the mounting interest and projected legal fees. Ethan, Eleanor replied, her voice calm and steady, deliberately countering his fury. It's called conversion of secured property. You sold a house that had a lien on it for a loan I made to you. That loan with accrued interest and damages is now $67,000. It's what you owe me. In the background, Eleanor could hear Serafina's frantic screams, shrill and high-pitched. She's lying, Ethan. She's making it all up. Your mother is insane. Don't listen to her. Ethan, Eleanor cut through the noise, ignoring Serafina's accusations. Serafina has been having an affair, a long-term affair with a wealthy married man named Harrison Stone. He's a prominent real estate developer in the city. The money from your house, a large portion of it went to fund their relationship. Lavish gifts, expensive trips, secret rendezvous. His wife just found out and cut Serafina off. That's why she suddenly had no money and nowhere to go. The line went utterly silent. The background screams from Serafina abruptly ceasing. The shock in Ethan's silence was palpable, a stark contrast to his earlier rage. Eleanor could almost hear his world crumbling. Proof? Ethan finally croaked, his voice barely audible, laced with a desperate plea. Mom, you have to have proof. In the background, Serafina's frantic denial started again, weaker now but still insistent. He's lying. Your mother's lying, Ethan. Don't believe her. Confront her, Ethan, Eleanor challenged, her voice firm. Ask her about Harrison Stone. Ask her about his wife. Ask her why she suddenly has no money now that he's out of the picture. Ask her about Tiffany's boutique and where the $300,000 really went. Eleanor waited, listening to the agonizing silence, broken only by Serafina's diminishing protests. The phone line went dead. The next morning, Eleanor received a call from Mr. Sterling. Eleanor, he said, Ethan just called. He wants to meet. Immediately. Eleanor agreed, a flicker of hope igniting within her. When Ethan arrived at Mr. Sterling's office, Eleanor barely recognized him. He was gaunt, his face pale and hollow, his eyes sunken and bloodshot, framed by dark circles. The vibrant, optimistic young man she had raised had been replaced by a ghost of himself, looking years older than his actual age. He sat down heavily, avoiding Eleanor's gaze, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Mr. Sterling, with his characteristic professionalism, laid out the evidence methodically. He presented bank statements detailing Serafina's credit card debt, tracing back years, showing a pattern of exorbitant spending. He showed hotel receipts, not just from the supposed spa trip, but from numerous weekends at exclusive resorts, always with the name Harrison Stone conspicuously present on the booking details or room service charges. He presented the investigators' report on Tiffany's boutique, confirming its complete non-existence. He detailed Serafina's history of prior engagements, each ending in financial ruin for the unsuspecting fiancés. He painted a meticulous, damning portrait of Serafina, not as an impulsive spender, but as a calculated, long-term fraudster. As Mr. Sterling calmly presented each piece of evidence, Eleanor watched Ethan. His initial stoicism gave way to a tremor in his hands, then a deep, shuddering breath. By the time Mr. Sterling finished, Ethan's shoulders were shaking. He buried his face in his hands, and the sound of his ragged sobs filled the quiet office. "My whole life," he choked out, his voice broken, tears streaming down his face. "My whole life, it's all been a lie." He looked up, his eyes pleading with Eleanor, filled with a raw agony that tore at her heart. "Mom, I am so sorry. I was so stupid. How could I have been so blind?" Eleanor reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his arm. "She's very good at what she does, Ethan," she said, her voice soft with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "You were manipulated. It can happen to anyone." Ethan shook his head, refusing to be consoled by that excuse. "No, Mom, I should have seen it. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you." He swallowed hard, trying to compose himself. "I won't fight the lawsuit, Mom. I'll take full responsibility. I'll pay you back. Every single penny, immediately. If I have to take out a loan, I will." He took another deep, shaky breath, then looked at Eleanor, his eyes still brimming with tears, but now also filled with a new, steel-like resolve. "I'm filing for divorce." Eleanor felt a cautious surge of hope after Ethan's confession and declaration. Her son was finally seeing the truth, finally taking responsibility. It was a monumental step. Yet an instinct born of years of quiet observation told her that Serafina was not the type to retreat gracefully. A predator, once exposed, would lash out. Her intuition proved accurate just 3 days after Ethan filed for divorce. The tranquility of Eleanor's early morning routine was shattered at 6 a.m. by a frantic, ear-splitting pounding on her front door. The insistent thudding echoed through the house, shaking the very foundations of her peace. Eleanor, already awake and preparing her tea, glanced at the monitor of her newly installed security system. Serafina's face, distorted by rage and desperation, glared back at her. Her usually immaculate blonde hair was disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled, and her eyes, devoid of makeup, were puffy and red. She looked like a banshee, wild and unhinged. Without hesitation, Eleanor picked up her phone and dialed 911. "Get out of there, Eleanor! You hear me? Get out of that house!" Serafina shrieked, her voice carrying across the quiet morning air, loud enough to stir the neighbors. "You destroyed my marriage. You hired investigators to spy on us. You're a bitter, evil old woman." Eleanor watched, stony-faced, as Serafina continued her public spectacle. Mrs. Gable's curtains twitched next door, and Mr. Henderson peered over his fence. Serafina was on her knees now, dramatically sobbing, pounding her fists on the door, her pleas morphing into desperate begging. "Please, Eleanor, please, don't do this to me." Just as Serafina's theatrics reached a crescendo, the familiar wail of sirens signaled the arrival of Officer Ramirez and a new Officer Johnson. They found Serafina crumpled on Eleanor's doorstep, a picture of manufactured despair. "She kicked me out, officer," Serafina cried, pointing wildly at Eleanor's door. "Ethan kicked me out of the motel. He's divorcing me. I have no money, nowhere to go, and it's all Eleanor's fault." For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something akin to sympathy pricked Eleanor. Serafina truly seemed lost, broken. But then the image of Ethan's haunted face, the memory of her squandered retirement savings, the chilling details of the affair with Harrison Stone, all flooded back. Her brief twinge of pity vanished, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. Serafina had made her bed. Officer Ramirez, recognizing Eleanor from the previous incident, approached the door. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about a disturbance. Is this woman bothering you?" Eleanor spoke clearly into the intercom, her voice calm and firm. "Yes, officer, this is Serafina, my daughter-in-law. She is no longer welcome onto my property. She has been harassing me, and I have a restraining order pending." Officer Ramirez turned to Serafina, her expression stern. "Ma'am, you need to leave this property immediately. If you do not, you will be arrested for trespassing." Serafina began to protest, to argue, but the officers were unyielding. Officer Johnson took her arm, guiding her firmly toward the street. Serafina continued to shout insults and accusations until she was out of earshot, eventually melting away down the street, a defeated, disheveled figure. Once the street was clear, Eleanor called Ethan. His voice, when he answered, was heavy with sorrow. "Mom," he said, "I heard there were commotion. I'm so sorry. I told her to stay away from you." "She's gone for now," Eleanor replied, a sigh escaping her lips. "Are you all right?" "I am now," Ethan said, a newfound strength in his voice. "I told her to leave the motel. I told her I'm done being responsible for her problems. She has to figure out her own way now. I can't anymore." A wave of immense pride washed over Eleanor. This was the son she knew, the one she had raised, finally reclaiming his agency. "Where are you, Ethan?" she asked, concern creeping back into her tone. "I found a weekly motel, Mom. It's cheap, but it's clean," he explained. "I'm working overtime, picking up extra shifts. I'm saving every penny. I'm going to pay you back, Mom. Every cent of that $67,000. I insist. It's not just about the money. It's about showing you that I'm the man you raised me to be." Eleanor felt a tear prick her eye, a mixture of sadness for his pain and profound relief at his transformation. "I believe you, Ethan," she whispered. Just as Eleanor began to believe that the worst was over, Mr. Sterling delivered another update. "Eleanor, Serafina has retained legal counsel, a Ms. Evelyn Reed. She's a formidable attorney, known for taking cases on contingency. She's claiming your lawsuit is harassment and that the promissory note is invalid due to undue influence." Eleanor felt a familiar weariness settle over her. Serafina would fight tooth and nail. "Undue influence?" Eleanor scoffed. "From whom? Me, trying to help my son?" "Exactly," Mr. Sterling affirmed. "But we have our evidence, Eleanor. This will just make the case more complicated, not unwinnable." Determined to be prepared, Eleanor immediately began compiling meticulous records. She gathered phone logs, documenting every call with Ethan and Serafina. She dug out old emails, receipts for her initial $40,000 contribution, and meticulously documented every interaction, every missed payment, every insult. If Serafina wanted a fight, Eleanor would give her one. 2 days before the court date, Eleanor was at her workplace, a quiet administrative office, when the tranquility was shattered once more. Serafina burst through the door, her appearance as dramatic and unkempt as her last visit, demanding to speak with Eleanor. Her loud, accusatory tone immediately drew the uncomfortable stares of Eleanor's coworkers, disrupting the professional atmosphere. "Eleanor, we need to talk now," Serafina yelled, her voice echoing in the usually subdued space. "This lawsuit is ridiculous. We can settle this, you and I. Just drop it." Eleanor, maintaining her composure, walked over to a more private corner, away from her colleagues. "There's nothing to settle, Serafina, unless you are prepared to pay me the $67,000 you owe." Serafina's face contorted in frustration. "I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't." "Then there's nothing to discuss," Eleanor stated, turning to walk away. Serafina's composure cracked entirely. Her eyes narrowed, and a venomous sneer twisted her lips. "Don't walk away from me, you old witch. You think you've won? I know things about your precious Ethan that would surprise you. Things that could land him in a lot of trouble. Things I have proof of." Her threat hung in the air, cold and menacing. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. She knew Serafina was capable of anything. Immediately she called Ethan, recounting Serafina's veiled threats. Ethan's voice was filled with dread as he confessed. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "Serafina. She kept copies of some things. Back when we were trying to get the mortgage, she convinced me to falsify some loan documents, inflate my income slightly on the application, and some of my side jobs early on. She persuaded me not to report the income fully." He sighed, a sound of profound self-loathing. "She said it was insurance in case I ever tried to leave her, that she'd expose me." Eleanor's heart sank. She had known Ethan had weaknesses, but this was a depth of deception she hadn't imagined. "We need to tell Mr. Sterling, Ethan, now." They met Mr. Sterling that very afternoon. Ethan, still visibly shaken, laid out his past financial misdeeds. Mr. Sterling listened carefully, his expression unreadable. "It's not ideal, Ethan," he finally said, "but it's manageable. The fact that you are voluntarily disclosing this now before it's brought up by the opposition works in your favor. We'll approach the authorities and disclose it ourselves. There will likely be penalties, perhaps fines, but your cooperation will mitigate the severity. The day of the court arrived, a crisp autumnal morning. Eleanor sat beside Ethan in the plaintiff's row. Ethan looked gaunt and nervous, but there was a new, quiet determination in his eyes. He had faced his demons, having already made the voluntary disclosures to the relevant authorities, a painful but necessary step towards redemption. Presiding over the case was Judge Eleanor Hayes, a woman known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach. Ms. Evelyn Reed, Serafina's attorney, a sleek woman with an air of aggressive confidence, began her opening statements, artfully painting Serafina as a victim of a vindictive mother-in-law, unjustly targeted for the collapse of her marriage and finances. Then Mr. Sterling rose, his presence calm and authoritative. He systematically presented Eleanor's case, beginning with the indisputable promissory note, the clear terms of the loan, and the documented lack of payment. He then presented evidence of the unauthorized sale of the house, a direct breach of the lien. He concluded this segment by meticulously detailing Serafina's physical assault on Eleanor, with Mrs. Gable and the responding police officers waiting to testify. In a move that sent a ripple of murmurs through the courtroom, Mr. Sterling then called a surprise witness, Mr. Harrison Stone. Stone, looking uncomfortable but composed, confirmed the long-term affair with Serafina. Under Mr. Sterling's careful questioning, he revealed how Serafina had consistently lied about her marital status and financial situation, presenting herself as a single, struggling entrepreneur who needed his guidance and support, all while expertly extracting money and favors. Judge Hayes, her gaze piercing, turned her attention directly to Serafina after Mr. Stone's testimony. Ms. Miller, the judge began, using Serafina's maiden name, regarding the promissory note, are you denying the existence of this legal document or your obligation to repay the funds that were secured by the property you sold? Serafina, under Ms. Reed's whispered counsel, tried to deflect. Your Honor, it was family money, a gift, really. Eleanor always said she'd help us. Judge Hayes cut her off, her voice firm. Mr. Miller, a gift does not come with a written, signing promissory note, nor is it secured by a lien on a property. You signed the document. Did you not understand its terms? Serafina mumbled a vague excuse, but the judge's expression was unyielding. The judge then shifted her focus to the assault, allowing Mrs. Gable to provide her first-hand account of Serafina's violent outburst. Officers Ramirez and Johnson then corroborated the account, detailing Serafina's arrest. Finally, Mr. Sterling presented the overwhelming evidence of Serafina's reckless spending, painstakingly detailing the credit card debts, the lavish purchases, and the complete fabrication of Tiffany's boutique. He emphasized the systematic fraud, revealing how Serafina had methodically drained Ethan's assets, not just for personal luxury, but to finance her deceitful affair. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the full extent of Serafina's calculated betrayal was laid bare. After a brief recess, the courtroom hushed as Judge Eleanor Hayes returned to the bench. Her gaze, encompassing the entire room, finally settled on Serafina, who sat rigid beside her attorney, Ms. Reed. The judge's voice, clear and firm, delivered the ruling that would forever alter the course of their lives. This court finds a clear-cut case of financial fraud and manipulation, Judge Hayes declared, her words echoing with undeniable authority. The evidence presented, including the legally binding promissory note, the testimony of Mr. Harrison Stone, and the detailed financial records of Ms. Miller's spending, unequivocally demonstrates a pattern of deceit and deliberate financial endangerment. Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her, a tightening in her chest that finally began to ease. Ethan, seated beside her, let out a slow, shaky breath. Therefore, the judge continued, Miss Serafina Miller is hereby ordered to pay the plaintiff, Eleanor Davies, the full amount of $67,000, plus all accrued legal fees and court costs, within 30 days of this ruling. Should Ms. Miller fail to comply, the court will authorize immediate wage garnishment and seizure of any discoverable assets. Ms. Reed rose, attempting to interject. Your Honor, my client has virtually no assets, no income. Judge Hayes cut her off, her voice stern. This court will not reward financial fraud with sympathy, Ms. Reed. Ms. Miller deliberately squandered substantial assets through reckless spending and deceit. Her current financial predicament is entirely of her own making. Then, the judge delivered a final devastating blow for Serafina. Furthermore, given the egregious nature of the financial deception and the documented pattern of fraudulent behavior, this court will be forwarding a comprehensive report of these proceedings to the district attorney's office for potential criminal fraud charges against Ms. Miller. Serafina's face, already pale, drained of all color. She looked utterly defeated, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. As they exited the courthouse, Serafina, tears streaming down her face, managed to fix Eleanor with a hateful glare. "This isn't over, Eleanor," she hissed, her voice hoarse with fury. Eleanor met her gaze, her own expression calm and resolute. "Yes, Serafina," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "It is over. It's been over since the moment you raised your hand to me. You chose this path, and now you will walk it." 3 months later, Ethan called Eleanor, his voice filled with a lightness she hadn't heard in years. "Mom," he announced, "guess what? Tiffany, Serafina's friend from the boutique scam, she's been arrested for fraud. It's all over the news. They confirmed it was a complete fabrication." Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile of satisfaction. "Good. She deserves to face justice." "And me, Mom," Ethan continued, "I've found a new job. It's honest work, no shortcuts. I'm in a small apartment, saving my money. And I just made another payment to you. I'm happy, Mom. I feel liberated." Eleanor's heart swelled with pride. She had gotten most of her money back. Yes, but far more importantly, she had gotten her son back. Serafina was now facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, and Mr. Harrison Stone's marriage, as predicted, had indeed ended in a messy divorce, a testament to the ripple effects of Serafina's destructive path. One evening, Eleanor received a text from an unknown number. It contained a vague, threatening message, clearly from Serafina, still attempting to sow fear. Eleanor simply blocked the number and deleted the message, feeling secure in her quiet home and the newfound peace she had earned. A year later, Eleanor decided it was time for a fresh start. She sold her beloved home, packed her memories, and moved to a peaceful retirement community in sunny Arizona. Here, she cultivated a new garden, just as vibrant as her old one, and found joy in the simple pleasures of life, surrounded by genuine kindness. Ethan visited regularly, no longer the haunted, manipulated man, but a thriving, independent individual who had found genuine friends and a fulfilling career. They never spoke of Serafina, the painful chapter of their lives now firmly closed. Then, one quiet evening, as the desert sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Eleanor's new neighbor Martha approached her. "Eleanor, there's a young woman at your door. She looks quite distressed." Eleanor walked to her front door, a sense of quiet anticipation settling over her. Standing there was a woman who, despite her distraught appearance, shared a striking resemblance to Serafina. "Mrs. Davies?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. "My name is Isabel Thorne. I'm Serafina's sister. I need your help." Isabel explained that Serafina, having served her time and moved to Florida, was now operating under a new identity, repeating her manipulative patterns with a new wealthy target. She had once again drained someone dry and left a trail of emotional and financial destruction. Eleanor, her expression calm and composed, invited Isabel inside. As she prepared 2 cups of her finest herbal tea, she began to share her entire story, from the unexpected arrival on her doorstep to the final courtroom drama. She spoke of documenting everything, never backing down, and the absolute necessity of protecting oneself, no matter how painful the truth might be. As she recounted her journey, Eleanor realized with quiet certainty that she was stronger than she had ever imagined.